We're off to the races.
This week on Let's Talk Texas, county and SD conventions are wrapped up, clearing the way for the Republican state convention. Plus, a look at President Trump's rally in Tulsa and looking back at the roundtable in Dallas earlier this month.
This is the issue of this election.
Texas isn't great just by chance.
When you overtax, overregulate, and overlitigate, guess what? They're going to look for places to go.
The classic question in politics: are you better off now than you were 2 years ago? It's Texas.
We will never give up Texas!
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
All right, welcome to Let's Talk Texas. I am your host, Jordan Overturf, joined by my co-host, RPT Chairman James Dickey. Chairman, how are you doing, sir?
I am doing great. It was a fantastic weekend out and about with folks. The Metroplex had some beautiful Texas spring rains, which are always welcome. And we had amazing activists from all over the state, not just in the Metroplex, who were involved in county conventions. You were one of those, right?
Yeah. I got together with my friends in Williamson County over the weekend. We had a great time on Saturday out at the Cowboy Church there in Liberty Hill. What a place to have a convention, right? Liberty Hill, right? Texas has some of the best city names in the country. You can fight me on it. At me, please do. Chairman, let's just go ahead and get into it. This wraps up all of our county SD conventions, correct? Or did I miss any?
So close. That was week 6 of our 7 weeks of convention, which is really unusual. Normally, all conventions all around the state all happen on one weekend. And frankly, I've loved that they've been spaced out this time so that I've been able to attend so many of them. It's really fantastic. And so we've got the last day for a Senate district or county to turn in their delegate list is midnight on this coming Saturday, June 27th. So we do have some counties who have waited. And in fact, my own convention is going to be this coming Saturday in Travis County, and I can't wait to participate.
We'll leave it to Travis County to be the trendsetters. Chairman McCowiak knows how to book an event. So I'm sure you guys are going to have plenty to talk about at that convention. I guess the simplest question as we look toward wrapping up this whole process is what's next, Chairman?
Well, so the next thing is everybody's got to get their delegate list in. The final day, they're supposed to get their delegate list in 5 days after the convention, but the absolute deadline is midnight, June 27th. So we need all those delegate lists into the RPT because by June 30th, the SREC, the State Republican Executive Committee members, they have to have their recommendations for the convention temporary committee members. And we have temporary committees on rules and on resolutions and on legislative priorities. And so that's one person from each Senate district that needs to serve on each of those. And you're only allowed to serve on those if you have been elected a delegate from your Senate district or county convention. So we have to have those lists in by the 27th, midnight, so that by noon on the 30th, I can have all the appointments from the SREC members, State Republican Executive Committee members, in. And the way the rule works, if the two SREC members from a given Senate district, if they agree on who the appointment is to a given committee, then that's who it is. If they do not agree, then I have the responsibility of going through and picking between their recommendations. I can't pick some random third person, but I have to pick between their recommendations. So I have to do that. It is my goal to turn those around in 24 hours so that the convention temporary committees chairs can get to work on contacting those members, doing the work ahead of time. I know several of those, we've got 3 convention temporary chairs, and they have already been hard at work on preparing, especially the platform folks, because they have thousands of things to go through, and they've got 3 days to do it. So there is a lot of work. We're going to have a teletown hall tomorrow night. June 23rd at 7 p.m. Central Time. So please, everybody tune in for that teletown hall, and we will give you all sorts of details about the preparations happening for our state convention and more details about those committees.
Yeah, and if you look at the county and SD convention process, that's kind of a microcosm of what happens at the state level. And so, I personally want to give a shout out to Chairman Armbruster and his committee there in Williamson County. They had everything running on schedule, even with everything going on. The social distancing, some people not showing up, but still letting them know their intent to go to state convention. So it is amazing the amount of work that happens within our county parties and our SD conventions to get all this input. There's so many different party platforms that are being brought up at this point. Obviously, there's wide-ranging discussion on so many issues at this time. So for those who haven't been involved, this upcoming weekend, if you have a county convention, that's the place to get involved, have these discussions, and put those forward. So before we wrap this up though, and I know we've got the town hall and everything, you got to have a teaser for us, right, Chairman? Anything specific that we can look forward to on this town hall?
Absolutely. There have been some big news out of Houston, out of Harris County in the last 72 hours. We are going to be talking about how we move forward, how we handle masks, how we handle security, how we will handle the potential of protests and the rest. There are big issues to move forward with, but as you saw personally in Williamson County, and as I will be participating in personally in Travis County this weekend, this convention process is how Texas's Republican Party stays so grassroots led and grassroots driven. And we are going to continue to that. And that's why I have fought through a pandemic to make sure that we have our in-person convention in Houston next month. And I can't wait.
Well, I know there are Republicans across the state who are cheering you for not backing down, not capitulating to the folks there in Houston or Harris County. So we certainly appreciate that. We saw a little bit of what a convention type process would look like this weekend when President Trump held his rally in Tulsa on Saturday. Can you give us just a quick recap on how that went, and did we learn anything from that experience?
Well, so President Trump held a Keep America Great rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma on Saturday night. There were 10 million viewers, not including TV viewership, just online, who tuned into his rally across digital and social media platforms. Truly amazing. Joe Biden cannot fill an arena like President Trump can. And whenever it is that he finally emerges from his basement bunker, voters get reminded how liberal his agenda is and how risky it would be to have him as president. And so that is, it was a good reinforcement of that, and a reinforcement of the fact that we have opened up for campaigning as well.
Yeah, I mean, all there's a variety of coverage on this thing, but I was watching some of the recap yesterday, and he is someone who does not get distracted very easily by some of this other stuff going on. He has a very focused message in terms of talking to his supporters and delivering exactly what his thoughts are to the country. You got to give the president that he is not letting anyone or anything stand in his way of getting his message out there. And clearly with that big of an online viewership, people are listening. They are hanging on to what the president is saying. And so I don't know, when you see some of the things going on, disruptions, protests, pushing back. We now have new polling from last week that showed Joe Biden is increasing his lead over President Trump. But this kind of all feels like a replay of 2016, right? Like, I mean, why should voters even believe this poll anymore? When similar polls conducted around the same time in 2016 showed Hillary Clinton winning in a landslide, supposedly.
Yeah,
right?
There's no question that the press and other Democrats, our mainstream media, is very interested in pushing this narrative that the president is in trouble in hopes of discouraging the president's supporters. But there is no denying the unmatched enthusiasm for President Trump. The enthusiasm differential between Joe Biden and President Trump is just off the charts. The RNC and the Trump campaign have more than $150 million cash on hand advantage over the DNC and the Biden campaign. And Trump victory, including our own RPT Trump victory folks, have engaged and trained over 1 million volunteers. And the Trump victory operation, including the Republican Party of Texas Trump victory operation, has state directors in 23 states and more than 1,100 staff in the field. Now, in contrast, Joe Biden has no state directors at all in battleground states like Pennsylvania and Michigan and Florida and North Carolina and Wisconsin and Nevada. The president's already running ads in Nevada. Iowa, Ohio, Georgia, Minnesota, Colorado, and New Hampshire. And so the difference, I got to tell you, seeing it behind the scenes, the president's campaign could not be more organized, more well-led, more active and involved. And it's coming from both ends. The president is committed to running a great campaign and his team is fantastic, but the volunteers are excited and fired up and stepping up. So it's a wonderful virtuous cycle that is going to grow to an unstoppable lead come the election.
Yeah. When you read off all those states, a lot of those seem like replay of the Clinton campaign in 2016, deciding to not pay attention to a lot of the states on that list, right?
I mean, but Democrats have taken voters for granted in different communities, in different states for far too long. We aren't taking voters for granted in Texas even. They are doing it again, and voters don't appreciate being taken for granted, and we're seeing it very clearly in a whole bunch of states that really will matter for the November election.
Yeah. And, when you look back at the coverage in 2016 about the president's, his campaign and the way everything was organized, he took a lot of heat and the way that operations were going on across the state. But I know I personally was in Pennsylvania working on a program where we hit 1 million doors on behalf of Senator Pat Toomey and President Trump there in those last 2 months of the campaign cycle. And, the people that I was working with on the ground there were telling me they had never seen that part of Pennsylvania, southeastern, the Philly area, so divided, right? They had spent decades watching this be a one-way direction toward the Democrats. And 2016 showed that voters across this country are more and more divided. And then add to it, now we're in a re-election cycle where the president has more organization than ever. He's got a proven leadership team that has brought him victory before and is going to do it again. And now he has a record of achievement. Before it was, his inexperience. Trump is not ready to lead this country. And here we are, 2020. We've gotten monumental tax reform. We've gotten deregulations. We've gotten rid of some of the most harmful portions of Obamacare. We have worked harder than ever to secure our border. And now we see the Democrats and the left, Antifa, whoever is behind tearing this country down is working their tails off to burn down everything that the president has worked so hard to build. And I don't know, like, as we look at all this stuff, do the Democrats really look like they're prepared for this fight? Like from your experience, Chairman, does this look like a Democrat party that is ready for what 2020 is bringing?
Well, one of the things I tell every candidate is to take no race for granted, always run like you're down 10 points, don't take a single vote for granted, a single contact for granted. So we are not going to look at the lack of money on the Democrat side, the lack of state directors on the Democrat side. We're not going to look at that and go, great, we can sit on our laurels. We are going to work like crazy regardless. But clearly, as you look at objective facts, they do not seem to have their act together. But they keep pushing this narrative that there's some blue wave and then it's amazing. They want to discourage Republican voters and don't let them. As I told people repeatedly over the last few weeks, the difference this election will come down to who outworks the other side. And in some cases, in some areas, we got outworked in the midterm. Well, we are not going to get outworked this time. And my money, now that we have a plan, now that we have support, now that we've raised the funds, we are not going to get outworked. And my money is on Republicans outworking Democrats every day of the week.
Well, and certainly President Trump has shown how important Texas is to him, making numerous stops here. He actually had a stop in Dallas earlier this month where he had a roundtable discussion. You were actually there, weren't you, Chairman?
I was. It was really a fantastic event. So proud of the president, the way he is really leading on a positive note that he was talking about. How do we move forward and talk about change that would prevent something like this from happening again, and reminding folks of the things he had already done in advance, not waiting for a tragedy like this to happen, and hopefully making it less likely to have a tragedy like the George Floyd's terrible death happening, but doing the First Step Act, trying to already do criminal justice reform to really make the criminal justice system a little less lopsided and a little less overbearing, which as conservatives, that's exactly what we want. And he also had worked on his more funding for historically Black colleges and universities. And he had also passed the opportunity zones piece of the tax reform bill of 2017, which makes it really easy for private money to do serious investment in underserved and minority areas. And I had a great chance to have a talk with Senator Tim Scott on Friday afternoon. He was the one who crafted that portion of the bill. And he was the one who had been advancing that. He's got a great book out called Opportunity Knocks that we talked about. And as he said, the key of this is it's private money advancing that. So not just making structural changes that will incredibly help minority communities, but that are in alignment with our principles. And once again, it's conservative principles that are the right response to the biggest structural challenges we see.
Yeah, and we have to give a shout out to Senator Tim Scott, who has been standing up on behalf of President Trump loud and proud. And because of that, he's starting to get knocked down from the left. He's got a big target on his back now.
Very much. And when he spoke, and he's great. He is a bold leader, and so he is willing to take those hits. But he did give a shout out to both our senators, Senator Cornyn and Senator Cruz, for being big supporters with him of the police reform and of the opportunity zones. He said he could not have done and could not be doing what he's doing without the help of Texas's two great senators.
Yeah, and it's great to see Republicans like Tim Scott being out there as a contrasting voice to so much negativity on the left and really leading the charge. We've had guys like him, guys like Will Hurt. Geez, why is that name? He's one of my favorite reps in the Texas delegation. Apologies, Representative Hurd. But we've also got some folks who are on the rise, rising voices here in Texas. Republican Will Douglas, who's running in HD 113, got a chance to be part of that roundtable discussion. What were his contributions to that?
Well, so he shared his experience as a pharmacy owner in Dallas and how he's personally benefited and his employees have benefited from his ability to work through the provisions of the Paycheck Protection Program loans. He didn't have to lay anyone off. He was actually able to hire additional employees that he needed because his business model changed overnight. Patients weren't able to come through into the pharmacy anymore. They had to rely on the drive-through. And of course that changed up ancillary sales and like. But he applauded capitalism and the free market. And as a business owner, he was able to see firsthand that capitalism works.
Yeah, Will's a friend of the Big Texas podcast, and I actually talked to him right in the middle of the coronavirus response when everything was shut down, and he was between batches on making hand sanitizer that he was delivering to first responders and frontline workers during that. So, if you want to hear his perspective, you can certainly watch the recap of the roundtable, or go back and listen to that episode of him with the Big Texas podcast where we talk about it extensively.
I'd recommend either of those, but also talking about the roundtable, cannot overlook the participation of our own national committee man, Dr. Robin Armstrong. He has really been in the crosshairs of the left as the resident physician for an extended care home, for a nursing home, where frankly a lot of the deaths nationwide have come from. He was able to care for over 80 patients and not lose a patient that had 80 patients that had coronavirus.
Yeah.
Who were all very much up in age and in a nursing home, and he was able to save them all. And he spoke out against the left having such Trump derangement syndrome that they would try to prevent a valid treatment opportunity from being even considered because the president had mentioned it. And it really is, we have entered an upside down world when people are willing to do that, to withhold a potential treatment just because of who mentioned it. That's absolutely crazy.
Yeah. One of the early adopters of the chloroquine discussion. And I'm glad you brought him up because Jason Vaughn and I have been trying to get Dr. Armstrong on the Big Texas podcast. So maybe he hears this and he hits
That's
us
awesome.
up. But going back to Will, he's a strong candidate and he's in a tough class of Republicans this cycle who are fighting to take back some of those seats that flipped in 2018. What are some of those other races and who are the Republicans to running, as the kids say, hashtag take it back?
Well, some of the great candidates we have, and I'm so proud of our whole school, a whole class of candidates. We at the Republican Party of Texas did our first real aggressive, organized candidate recruiting and training program we had ever done. And as a result, right now in the state of Texas for the November election, we're going to have Republicans in 2,118 races. There are only Democrats in 837 races. So we've already won 1,300 races because we were so aggressive about recruiting candidates, but also because we were so open about spreading the message. We were looking for people who share our beliefs to step up and run against incumbent Democrats. And that was our message. Our message at the party was, we want to challenge every incumbent Democrat we possibly can. And because that was our message, we have had an amazing class of candidates step up. And so in Democrat strongholds, Luisa Del Rosal running in HD 114 there in Dallas, Genevieve Collins running in CD 32, the congressional district that Colin Allred won from us last time. Genevieve is battling to get that. Wesley Hunt running in CD7 in the greater Houston area. Another race that Lizzie Fletcher had won that away from us. So we've got a really great candidate with a really great shot of winning that back. And that cannot be overstated, right? We at the party, we build up a great foundation. We put out the word, we organize, we take away basic costs that candidates don't have to bear anymore because the party does it on a scalable basis. But at the end of the day, we need a great candidate. When we won that House District 128 seat in Fort Bend, House District 28. Gary Gates was the candidate who won that. We absolutely helped. We had a team on the ground. We coordinated. We provided data. We had all of that. But at the end of the day, the candidate really, really matters, which is why that candidate recruiting task force was so important and why the great candidates like I just listed off and Will Douglas are fantastic to have. And I'm happy to be supported.
Yeah, I also want to give a shout out to Ederson Hernandez, who's trying to get Rodney Anderson's seat back. Terry Meza won that in 2018 as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
That's another great candidate.
Yeah, we've got so many, and really there are too many to mention, right? I mean, we've got 2,118, we've got 120-ish running in the Texas House. I mean, we have folks, Karen Brownlee, they're running for the seat formerly held, I think it's 105, the seat formerly held by Matt Rinaldi.
Mhm.
We have got great candidates. Kronda Timish running.
Yeah, I'm in Denton County right now. If I don't mention Kronda, like Janie Howell is going to find me. She's going to track me down. So, yeah, big shout out to Kronda, another friend of the podcast. She came on before the primary. There are so many great candidates, but the left is so focused on this blue wave that they want to build, and we want to be sure and remind them that it's not just about keeping Texas red. We are focused and attacking hard in these districts, trying to win back these important congressional and House district seats, because there is so much at stake in 2020.
Absolutely. And we've been doing our, volunteer engagement project and the 10K for 10R. One of the reasons why we did that, one of the reasons why it was a volunteer engagement project, one of the reasons why we were looking for 10,000 volunteers is because we want to build up a volunteer army that can then flip to working on voter turnout and supporting all of those candidates across the state. And in fact, we already have dozens of field staff all across the state. We're bringing on more here in the next couple of weeks. We are going to continue to grow that field staff to support all of our candidates up and down the ballot. And please, anybody listening, sign up for 10K for 10R by texting 10K to 72,000, 10K to the number 72000. That'll get you on our volunteer list. It's a super easy volunteering effort. We'll send you 10 names and numbers of people we're 90% sure are not yet Republican, or 90% sure are Republican, and 90% sure are not yet registered to vote in Texas at their current address. And you just call them and ask them if the Republican Party of Texas can mail them a voter registration form and get us back the answers. We'll go from there. But then the folks who have completed that effort, and we've already got over 4,000 folks who have, those folks are proven volunteers who care enough about the party to put some phone calls in. And that's a wonderful pool, a wonderful set of resources, a wonderful organized base that will help all of these 2,118 candidates we have across the state.
Yeah, we're running short on time, so we're going to go ahead and skip to our last topic, which is a perfect transition for this. We've been talking so much about state convention and getting ready for that, making sure that the party is taking all of those precautions. But there are some folks who still can't make it to state convention. And I wanted to ask you, for those folks who won't be able to come to Houston next month, what are some other activities that they can take part in?
Oh, if you can't make it to state convention, first of all, we're going to live stream the whole thing. We're going to live stream the general session meetings. We also have the temporary committees. They're going to be live streaming their meetings, and they're going to be putting info up on Google Docs so you can see and be informed. Even if you are coming to convention, you can be informed before you arrive about the issues you care most about and what's going on that front. And if you don't have a lot of time to volunteer on a campaign, but you want to be involved, then by all means, volunteer as a poll watcher or election worker for November. So in fact, we are working right now on our election judge and alternate judge lists. Please email me at jrdickey, jrdickey, D-I-C-K-E-Y, at texasgop.org, and I'll get you connected up with your local folks to be an election worker in November. I call it a volunteer job because it pays a little bit, but it is a crucial role. We are doing all this work to register voters. We're doing all this work to turn out voters. We need to be sure that we don't let Democrats not have someone watching over their shoulder when they're counting those votes that got cast. So 75 in this presidential election, over 75% of Texas voters are going to vote in a countywide polling system. That means the Democrat presiding judges at those polling places will have electronic access to the records of every registered voter in those counties. And over the last 3 general elections, we've seen a growing number of those polling places across Texas reporting more votes cast than voters processed. That's a huge problem. And that's one we can only deal with if we actually have eyes on the ground during the election. And the deadline for reporting, for providing the names of who's going to work from the party on that election is just coming up in a few weeks. So by all means, email us, email me, jrdickey@texasgop.org. I will get you connected up. We will make sure that we have the field force that we must have, and you can be a key part of that. And that's in October and November during early voting and election day in November. That is a huge way you can help. Even if you're at state convention, it's in October and November.
Yep. And that's all for us. Before we get out of here, just a reminder, we got to make sure voters are reminded the early voting for the primary election runoff starts next week on June 29th. July 10th is the last day of early voting, I believe, and election day is July 14th. So if you are in a district, either congressional district, state house district, or in your county, there might be a runoff for some of those Republican candidates. Make sure you check with either the Secretary of State's office or your local county elections department for sample ballots, polling locations, all of that stuff. Because of Corona, they extended early voting for the primary runoff an extra week. Right. Plenty of time. Make sure you get out and do that. Chairman, that's all we got today. Before we get out of here, do you have a good Father's Day?
I had a great Father's Day. I have 3 amazing kids that I'm so proud of. My wife and I are incredibly blessed. I also got to spend a little time with my father, and I know how blessed I am to even still have him at my age and his, and I am grateful for that. And it was a real blessing to spend some time with both my kids and my dad on Father's Day.
Yeah, it's always nice to see those touching tributes on Father's Day and Mother's Day across social media, especially from, your elected officials, right? You get a little window and their own personal history. So that's good stuff. Chairman, thank you so much. I'll let you get back to it. I know you got so much to do for convention, elections, everything going on. Thank you to you for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Let's Talk Texas. You can follow Chairman James Dickey on Twitter at James Dickey. And for the latest on how we are going to keep Texas red, follow the Republican Party of Texas on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.